So one of the things that I really like about historical romance is learning some things about history. And I think that's really reading it in a book, and a fiction book is a really fun way to learn some new things about history. So if you're like that and you're interested in learning some history, you could try my new book, A Shop Girl's Guide to Wooing a Lord. So one of the elements in my book that is a small part of the story is the practice of the British Navy impressing able-bodied men into naval service. So this was a practice where the Navy, maybe a group of men from a ship who was short on sailors, would go into port. They would round up every able-bodied man that they came across. If you had experience as a sailor, that was a bonus, but if you didn't, they might just take you anyway. At various points in history, this practice was illegal, but nobody really did anything about it until much later in the 1800s. So at the time of my book, it is something that is still happening. And in fact, the backstory of my heroine includes a situation where her father was actually rounded up by one of these press gangs and put to work on a ship. This practice didn't only happen in England, it would also happen when British ships would encounter ships with people of other nationalities. Perhaps they would have a skirmish at sea, and if the British won, they didn't sink the ship, they might board the ship and they might take all of these sailors on board and force them to work on their ship. And this was actually one of the causes of the War of 1812, because the Americans got pretty tired of the British taking their ship and pressing all of the sailors into work for the British Navy. So going back to my book, this is a backstory, so I'm not really spoiling anything. When the heroine was young, her father just didn't come home one day, and they later found out that he had been pressed into service. There was a press gang, and he was pressed into service for the British Navy. They didn't see him again for years, and then one day they got a visit with the notice that he had been killed at sea. Because of course during that time, this is the early 1800s, England was often at war. They were at war first with America and the French, and then Napoleon came along, they were at war with him. So there was a lot of need for sailors and to outfit these warships. So that is part of her history, is that she lost her father after he was impressed into service, and it's one reason that she hates the Navy. And unfortunately, our hero is a former sailor. Anyway, if you are interested in learning more about impressment, there's lots of books on the British Navy, and if you just maybe don't want to read in depth about it, but you want to just touch on it, you can always try my book, A Shop Girl's Guide to Wooing a Lord.